quickly setting this up.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to try to speak loud. I'm normally a little bit on the low tone, so if anyone doesn't hear well, just shout and I'll speak louder. So, are we? Yeah. Hola, thank you for coming. And my name is Pablo Dominguez. I'm a senior UX designer at Just Eat. So you have any issues ordering your pizzas, you can talk to me and some of my colleagues are around there and we'll help you with that. That's my Twitter handle, TinyBig Studio. That's my website with my outdated blog. If you're interested in seeing what I wrote 2 years ago, that's the latest article. So stay tuned for that. And we're gonna talk about jobs to be done and how we applied it at Just Eat, what we got from it, what we learned, what we think it works, what we think it doesn't work. So yeah, hope you enjoy it, and we'll do some QA afterwards, so happy to answer any of your questions. So jobs to be done, an unexpected journey, as kind of like a Hobbit kind of style. So I want to ask you first, how many of you have heard of jobs to be done? Yeah, everyone? How many of you have practiced jobs to be done at your work? Yeah, quite a few. Yeah, I feel your pain too, yeah, good. So first question I want to ask is, how does your team decide what features to build? So basically, I'm going to go to how we did things 2 years ago at Just Eat and how we evolved and changed. So how did we decide what to build? So it was something similar to this, right? So you would have the PM there, QA, UX developers, all sitting in a council deciding, okay, I think this could be awesome. Why don't we build filters on the search results? Why don't we build this or that on the menu? It was more about, what do we think it would be good for the user? Maybe some piece of research that we did, but mostly about usability issues rather than pure insights from our customers. So what happens with that is that you get to the circle of, lean UX, build, iterate, A/B testing, get results, again, iterate. Yeah, so it seems pretty cool. But the problem is that you might run into what Thomas Sharon said in validating product ideas. You can get into this circle of validation, iteration, A/B testing, but you might be missing the point entirely. Because that point is, okay, what are you trying to do? What do we actually need to be building? Is that the right thing? Well, maybe that's the right thing, and we're constantly iterating, right? So the problem is that we need to focus on the problem rather than in the future, right? We cannot understood that, right? We knew that something was missing. So that's useful saying that. So what we did is that starting to focus on the problem. And in that sense, I just did have a group of colleagues, who's the product research team, and they're kind of like a small startup inside the company, and they try new frameworks and new ways of working and methodologies. So they started looking at jobs to be done. And 2 years ago, they mentioned, okay, so you guys maybe at product should start looking into this and see what you guys find. So yeah, with so much interest, we formed a small group of discovery, and researchers, designers, and product managers, we went into this journey of finding what jobs to be done is. So for those of you who are not very familiar to what jobs to be done is, it's basically, Clay Christensen is one of the first persons who coined the term, and it's basically the premise that people don't just consume products per se, but they hire products to do something for them, and they fire them when that doesn't work anymore, right? So it's this idea of, you hire the product because you're looking to get an outcome of it rather than the product itself. This is a good example that I quite like. So we have Mario as the user, the customer, and we have the product. This is from Samuel Hulick, by the way, from onboarding.com. So, Mario is not using the flower because it's nice, it's colorful, it's pretty. It's because he gets something from there. He gets an outcome, right? He becomes something really cool, who can throw fireballs with hands. So that is really what Mario is looking for. So that's kind of like what Jobs to be done is going towards. Also, going into a theory, Theodore Lewitt in the 60s, he said that people don't want quarter-inch drills. You've probably seen this many times that I had to add the drill slide always. So they're looking for quarter-inch holes. But if we dig a little bit further into that, and I'm using this from Jim Calbat's, which he did a really good workshop on this. So are people really buying drills? No, they're buying holes. But if we dig deeper into that, why are they buying the hole? Why do they need the hole? Well, maybe because they want a hanger frame. But why do they want a frame in the room? It's because they want to have maybe a picture of the family. Why? Because they love the family. So you start digging deeper and deeper, you're into this level of emotional aspects, and something that is a little bit more difficult to work on and difficult to measure. But if we, for example, focus on something like the frame, what is the job that the frame is doing, then maybe we can find a solution that you don't need to even drill your wall. You can use something like this. So that gets the job done and, clean walls also, right? So, I mean, this kind of like theory sounds compelling, sounds interesting, but where to begin? How do you apply this to products, especially digital products? I mean, can you apply this kind of way of thinking towards everything? So that's something that we were looking into 2 years ago. So when you start looking at jobs to be done, you find something like what Jalet found, right? Once I start looking into it, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of community infighting, because there's also interest in a way, because you have consultants doing their jobs to be done aspect, fighting with other consultants, personas versus jobs. There's a lot of complexity there that you need to find your way. So that was kind of like, how do we envision the jobs to be done hashtag that you go on Twitter. Sometimes it looks like something like this. You got the jobs, the personas fighting over there, and you have the outcome-driven innovation versus the Muestra-style jobs to be done. So there's a lot of things to go through, and a lot of buzzword articles on Medium. I mean, I'm sure you've seen all of this, right? So that was our first challenge. Where do we begin? How do we start doing this? What is the starting point? What can we get out from this? So in the end, we identified two main themes on jobs to be done, two things that we could apply to our company. And those two were mainly the switch approach, the interview methodology to gather qualitative insights. That's really powerful for that. And also outcome-driven innovation as a way to prioritize outcomes, find opportunity spaces, and see how we can validate things at scale. So we kind of wanted to see if jobs to be done could do something on the qual and on the quant side of things, which sounded really awesome, right? But okay, his things here and there. So going into the qual type of things. So we have the Bob Mesta Workgroup approach, which basically is about finding what is the job that the customer is trying to do. It's kind of a variation of this. It's also used at Basecamp and Intercom. If you've seen their talks, they use this quite a lot. So this approach is basically going into an in-depth interview with a person and trying to find out, again, like what are the motivations, what are the outcomes, what are they looking for to hire on a product. So that type of interview follows a structure, and it's called the timeline. I'm going fast on what kind of like jobs to be done theory. I'm sure that there might be things that you might not understand. Happy to have a talk afterwards and explain things a little bit further. But yeah, so the timeline is what you use in the interviews to go from the first moment that the customer thought that they had a need to something to get a job done with a different product until the product is consumed, the experience is finished. So all the way through from the beginning to the end, there's a few things going on. There's events happening. So the idea is that you're going with the customer on the interview, going through, okay, talk to me about the first thought that you had about buying this product. So you guiding the interview, that's like the framework that you use. I'm going to show you what we did afterwards. But the idea is that there are several events going on. And during those events, you find what's called the 4 forces. 4 forces are basically things that are happening in the consumer's mind while they're thinking of switching from one product to the other. So one, the push of the situation, meaning I need to get a new car, for example, because mine is crap. The pull of the new idea, so I really like this new car because it's really interesting. I like the features, whatever, so what's calling from the product. And we also have the forces that pull you towards the current solution, which is anxiety of the new. Will this work? Will this not work? I'm not sure about it. And the habit of the present, I know this works. Why should I risk it? So all of these forces come into play if you look at of the journey from a customer changing from one product to the other. So it all sounds really nice, and the job map, etc. But buying a car is not the same as buying a pizza. So all the examples that you see online and on the videos and stuff is about things that require the customer to make a kind of like a big effort somehow. And we said, how can we apply this to something that seems so small as getting takeaway, right? However, we went with it, and that's me doing some interviews with my colleague Mark. So we just applied this method and see what we got from it. So what we did is, like I said, having the timeline of events. So from the first thought of getting takeaway till you eat the food and you finish. So we effectively, what we did is 1 hour in-depth interviews with people. And what we had in the background is like a whiteboard with all the different parts of the job. and we would dedicate the first half hour to do some sort of interrogation and just firing questions all the time to the person and like, why do you do this and what was the motivation? From the first moment they had the thought of ordering takeaway, then you realize that maybe it's not because they're hungry, it's because they had a bad day at work. So why do you have a day? So I mean, you start to get into more of an emotional kind of thing. So firing all these questions with the job steps to follow, then help us at the second half of the interview to just map everything on the board and then go with the person again and follow everything that the person was saying, go back to when you said that this happened at that moment, can you tell me more about it? So the idea behind this is to try to uncover what the person is trying to do, what are they trying to get from each of the steps, what works for them, what doesn't. And yeah, like I said, it's kind of like an interrogation. Sometimes it feels a little bit awkward because the person feels like, well, I never talk about a pizza for an hour so much with two people firing questions again. But I mean, that's a good way to get things going there. So what we learned from this is that two people interviewing works very well, mostly not because one is taking notes and the other one is talking, is because we were recording all the interviews, so we didn't take notes at the moment, just on post-it notes. And it keeps the ball rolling. When you run out of questions, then the other person is already thinking about something different. So it just going on and on to the person being interviewed. The focus is always on the last time that you did something. What this does is that instead of just asking the person, what do you think of this, or tell me about you, it's more about, okay, what did you do the last time that you ordered, what exactly happened? So they're talking from memory. They're not talking from their ideal version of this is how I want to be portrayed in this interview. No, I mean, they're just saying exactly what happened. And it's a little bit awkward at the beginning, but then you realize that they're talking from the real things that happened when they're using the product. So for example, people say, I love trying new things. When I order takeaway, I always order new dishes, and we find out that if you start asking, okay, well, tell me about what exactly happened the last times that you ordered, you realize that not really. They were ordering things that they were familiar with because they don't want to take risks. So that gets the conversation in a different situation, and that was really useful. And like I said, finding the dimensional aspects of the job, so the functional, obviously, but then also the social and emotional aspect, most of it. So you realize that as soon as you start asking why and what are the two motivations, it starts going into, like I said before, into more of an emotional, subjective space, that you find the true motivations of things that are not maybe related to something functional as we would imagine that it is. So what we did with all this information is that, we did 25 interviews, and we looked for patterns and themes, things that people had in common, and how we could maybe communicate this to the wider product and to the rest of the company. So we made it into stories, so things like this, right? To portray all the findings that we did and just to share it in a digestible way, right? So make it something that people can read, 5 minutes, you get the idea of what we found. So this was really useful for the product team. So this is the first approach that we tried just to be done. The second one, like I said, it's outcome-driven innovation, which is kind of like this Eddie-style hairdo guy. Is doing. So it's outcome-driven innovation is a process that helps find the opportunities, measuring outcomes quantitatively. So the idea is that with the outcomes that you get from the interviews, all those things that you're finding, you find a way to see that at scale, see that if that applies to the wider audience, right? So it measures the opportunities, it measures the opportunity spaces, and you get supposedly very good information from this. And the thing is that, well, if you apply this in my work, it might not, we're not really sure about it, but this is how we went with it. So the idea is that for each of the outcomes that we generated during the interviews, you ask on a survey to your customers, how important is this for you and how satisfied are you with your current solution? So you applied something that is called like opportunity algorithm, right? So what you do is that you measure those two elements and you get like a mapping, something similar to this. I can go into more detail about how this is calculated, but it would be boring and you might already read about it. So you get the outcomes that are overserved and served right and underserved. So the idea is that you can focus on those underserved outcomes, find out who are the type of customers that answer those questions, and do segmentation, clustering analysis. And it starts to get a little bit more into marketing, which wasn't exactly what we were looking for. We were looking for a way to kind of like validate ideas. And so what we did eventually is continue using this method. And the third challenge that we found is that to measure those outcomes, you need to follow this specific way of portraying the outcomes, right? So minimize, you need a direction, you need a metric, so you're measuring minimize the likelihood of moving the cut line path when making a cut. So this is an example of an outcome used as they use in strategy in ODI. So you're supposed to be writing, your takeaway pizza into something like, I want to minimize my, it doesn't really apply. I mean, that really applies for something like this, right? So very technical products that you're measuring how to cut straight in a line. You want to minimize the amount of debris that falls when I'm using. So you're getting into such a technical detail that doesn't really apply to what we were looking for. So we said, okay, well, maybe we can just, just tweak it a little bit and make it a little bit simpler. I mean, we're gonna send a survey to, 6,000 customers in the UK. We can't be using this terminology. I mean, we also, in some of the interviews, we tried to ask these questions and that way, minimize land. They wouldn't even know what they were answering there. Right? So we just used something much simpler to use. And we even talked to the strategy guys and they said, no, you have to stick with the other format because that's what works well. Anyway, we thought that this would work much better and, but that's what we went for. And what we did effectively is say, we launched a survey with 60 outcome statements to 6,000 takeaway customers. We did the analysis. We hired a statistician to help us with all of this. We got the clustering done. But we found that the most important bit that we got from this was this, was the kind of the prioritized outcomes list. So something to focus on rather than looking for the exact segmentation of customers. No, we weren't interested in that. We were interested in seeing what was the priority of outcomes on that survey. So gathering what I said before about all that qualitative information, those stories from customers, this prioritized list of outcomes. So all of that, we kind of like packed it and shared it with the wider product team. So that resulted in that some themes, and this is kind of blurred because this is confidential information, obviously, you can't see anything of this. So all those themes and outcomes inform the product roadmap for last year, right? So that was a very big thing that was used to identify how the company could move into, what the things to do during the year. As you can see, some of the quotes from the interviews were even used on those themes for the roadmap. And but more importantly, and what happened also is that furthermore, this research was applied for restaurants. So not only about customers, the restaurant partner team, they applied the same approach to restaurants. And it also led to the formation and the foundation of new cross-functional teams that would explore further in those themes. So it was kind of like the way that the company started to look into research as an insight generator, what I said at the beginning, rather than just like doing usability testing. It was more, we can get really good insights from these guys. Why don't we start adding research at the top and the center of product? So like I said, we created these disco teams. That's the disco ball theme that we use. And they use like design thinking techniques, etc., to kind of expand on these themes, look a little bit more in depth. Jobs to done. So measure all this and add it into like new discovery ways at the company. So that was this, moving research to the center and having customer-centered approach in a real way, rather than just like saying, no, we're doing customer-centered because we do usability testing. No, we're actually getting insights from research in product. And that's what I'm talking about, right? So, well, thank you. Hope you liked it. And any questions, just fire them out. Thank you.
Thank you, really enjoyed. I've done a bit of jobs to be done work, so it's interesting to have another reflection on how it went for you. What I found particularly interesting was the idea of interviewing somebody with two interviewers and putting post-its up during their interview. And I'm wondering if you could say a bit more about how that went and did you have to do any kind of staging with the participants around their perceptions of the post-its and what you were writing on them?
Yes.
Could you just talk about that?
Yeah, happy to do that. So like you said, we had a little bit of staging. So we had, table chairs. As soon as the participant arrived, they saw the whiteboard with the job steps there already. They had that in front of them. So they had us in front of them and behind the job steps. So they were looking at that continuously all the time. We also at the beginning said, this is going to be like a relaxed talk rather than an interview. This is a talk. We're talking right now. We're not interviewing you. And we just want to know what happened in a kind of like asking them to, if it was a movie or a documentary of what you did that last time. Just guide us through it, and we're going to ask you some questions. Maybe it gets a little bit more into detail, but it's fine. You just answer freely. So I think that the main thing there is that the customer feels like, these guys just want to talk to me about takeaway. That's, okay. And we realize also that once you get into the conversation, people like to talk about themselves and their motivations and things. I mean, they like to be heard, right? It's just approach that it needs to be like very, very simple in a way, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pablo. Great talk. What on the Jared Spool tweet that he put up? He said there was community inviting.
Yes.
What's the argument? What's the counter argument?
So, well, there's a few there. There's like jobs persona, blah blah, but that's like kind of an ongoing thing. But then you have like ODI, outcome-driven innovation, defending their theory, the way of doing things, versus some other consultants that they're doing jobs to be done, but maybe don't agree that that's the ODI is the way. ODI says that jobs to be done is what they're doing. The other one says, no, it's what we're doing. And it's like there's like this fight. I mean, it's like some kind of like dynasty thing, like like who's the one, like Game of Thrones they're going on with. But it's just basically, I mean, you just need to look through that and just get what you think works best on each of them.
How developmental, how mature is jobs to be done? Is it still evolving?
Yeah, it's continuously evolving. I mean, for all the workshops that I've done and, UX London last year, we had a few chats among colleagues and so forth. And it's something that we're doing as we go along. I mean, there's no set on stone thing. I mean, this is not like a magic wand that you apply and it works. I mean, there are things that work here and there, and you need to just focus onto that. Maybe a few years from now, some of those things change, but this is an evolving thing. And maybe what jobs to be done is really good practice, but the way it should be maybe, or not. I mean, I don't know. It's definitely not something completely new that is changing anything. That's my point of view.
Can you tell me a bit more about the functional, social, and emotional aspect of jobs and how you went about?
Yes. So the thing is that a job is more than just a functional thing, right? So when I'm ordering takeaway, it's not because I need food, right? That would be kind of like the functional thing. I'm using takeaway because that's the first thing that comes to mind, but you can apply it to many other things. There's also the social level. I mean, you're doing that because you also want to be with your family, right, for example. And you also have the emotional aspect to it. Maybe you had a bad day and you want some sort of reward. So there are three things that are happening at the same time. There are different layers of the same thing. So obviously you're getting fed, that's functional. You're getting that emotional thing, which is emotional, and you're getting the social aspect. So the thing is that jobs have like these three different kind of levels or lenses to look at them. That's kind of the theory, yeah.
All right, guys, so that's a wrap. So let's all take a break. We'll be back here in half an hour. You all guys will want to just...